and synchronicity. And yeah, sorry. So uh, I'm here to talk to you about what at WTA we are doing on amphibians and amphibian conservation. So we have chosen one part of India, which is Munnar in Kerala. It is in the Idukki district. And why this area is that because it is the key biodiversity area. Basically, what that means is that you will find more than 1,200 species of organisms here, which are listed in the IUCN Red List. And hence, that is why it is a key biodiversity area. And also, it is an alliance for zero extinction site. Well, basically, that means that you can't afford to have any biodiversity to any of these species to go extinct in that area. And this map that you're seeing basically shows, you can see here that it's pretty dark. And in the legend, it means that the number of threatened amphibians in that area is too high. And that's why they have chosen Munnar. And let's move on to threats, in the sense that why are amphibians so important, and why is everyone looking at them, and what are these threats that we need to know of. One is trade. These are really beautiful looking. There are, if you had looked at some of the frog pictures that come out in Instagram or other Facebook or something, then you will know that there are these most beautiful frogs. But the one that looks like the galaxy frog, and then there's the bright green, really beautiful, the Anomaly gliding frog, and the resplendent bush frog, which looks like an orange candy. It's really beautiful. So within India and outside, they are traded. So that is one threat. And then we have habitat destruction or fragmentation. That is, when you create roadways, like what we see in field is that there is a road, and on both sides there's a lot of grasses and also these overgrown vegetation where these frogs are seen, and they love those patches. And but when you widen the road or you do more constructions, it destructs their functioning, and they cannot really live in that place anymore. Then they'll have to go find for more places. And also, roads means roadkills. Most of us who drive around at night or during the rain or something, we are not that careful, or we would not really look at whether we are killing a frog or not. I mean, if it's a leopard or something, then we will definitely stop, but not for amphibians. So that is one reason. And then, yes, pollution, because these guys live in water, and through water, their skin is permeable, and through water is how they breathe. So if the water is polluted, they're also taking in harmful chemicals inside themselves, and that will harm them. And there is another big thing that is causing populations to go extinct, that is diseases. And there is this one disease, it's a fungal disease. It Chytridiomycosis, it's a hard name to pronounce. It's a fungal disease, we call it chytrid, and it affects the skin. What happens to the organism, to the frog or any other amphibian, Sicilian, for example, is that the skin will harden and then it starts to flake off. So when it starts to flake off, there's they cannot function. I mean, it's so they can't breathe. There's no moisture. It just hardens and sometimes even affects the internal organs, and they die off. It had wiped out populations in Australia and some places in UK also. It is that bad. Populations means like one entire species of frog gone because of this fungal disease. And then there is climate change. that will be that exactly one example is what we are uh, diving more deep into in this webinar. And I will talk more about how climate change is affecting the frogs in the coming slides. So now we know that all these things are affecting them. So WTI had started this project in Munnar, wherein we are trying to conserve the species through certain actions. So these are one, we are trying to create more breeding or development sites by creating more ponds. We're convincing plantations and other people also to construct ponds in their land so that frogs can live there. Not just one frog. It is scientifically proven that more ponds means more species richness of amphibians in that area. So that is a sure shot method. And then we are also creating suitable habitats in a way like estates, the cardamom estates that are seen in Munnar, they use pesticides and insecticides and also fertilizers. Some of it do affect the frogs. So we are also trying to convince these plantations to go frog friendly through certain guidelines, and also eventually getting them to go organic, which is good for not just the frogs but a lot of other animals too. And then, in order to look at the disease aspect, the one thing that we can do is that make sure that we are not spreading the disease. This particular fungus, now with COVID, we are all familiar how these diseases spread and how they don't really need a host or anything to stay. They can just be everywhere, and then we can be carriers as well. So we need to practice biosafety. And biosafety becomes really, really important while you're doing photography. So we have seen there's a lot of macro photography enthusiasts who would go looking for frogs, trying to take photographs. But when you handle them, if you handle them, it's you might then be responsible for a whole population of frogs to go extinct. So you need to use, in this picture here, this blue gloves. It's powder-free nitrile gloves, which is also sanitized. You will have to use a glove if at all you are going to handle a frog or any amphibian in that case. And also, when you're moving to places like Munnar is a very touristy place, and a lot of people come there. So from different places of India, when you come there, if you are going into a place to see such amphibians, where the amphibians are, you have to stick to certain protocols, sanitizing your shoe and also sanitizing yourself. And another thing that WTI is looking at is to have um, a learning and knowledge sharing platform for people to know more about amphibians. Very less people are there are very less people who knows about amphibians. There are very less people who are interested in amphibians. Earlier, when I used to talk to people, the general reaction that I used to get is, "You work on frogs, yuck." It's 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 not a popular thing. So what the amphibians need the attention from you all, and hence that's the main reason we are doing the webinar also. And this amphibian week also. This is the last day of amphibian week, and yes, uh, also we can share a lot of knowledge within each other, and we have created a frog squad. It's a WhatsApp group where you can join in, and also wherever you see a frog, or you think that it is in danger, or you don't know what it is, which species it is, or something is happening to it, you have any questions, you can put it in the WhatsApp group. We have um, people who had worked in the landscape, who knows more about these frogs in that group, and we can have a really good conversation regarding this in the WhatsApp group. So this is where I would actually stop. Monica, do we have uh,
Uh,
Monica?
yeah,
Hi.
hi Sethu. So I don't think Gururaja sir has joined this yet.
He
So
hadn't? Okay.
yeah, so maybe if
Sure, I'll continue with it then.
yeah, if you can just take it further.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
guys,
give.
I'll just be sharing the WhatsApp group link on the chat, so you may please join it right away.
So I'll start sharing again.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I hope you guys join in the group and we can chat more in there. If you have any questions and your questions aren't answered because of the time constraint here. Uh, so I told you that I will be discussing about climate change, more about climate change, how it is affecting amphibians. So what happens is, I will tell you what happened just last month. In April, we got over 20 days of rain, and that had made uh, this the Anomaly gliding frog, which we are studying now. And I saw them that I saw that they have started breeding in the summertime. Can can you see the video there? They're actively trying to, in this video, they're actively trying to make a nest and lay all the eggs so that they can, reproduce. And this happened, but we had only rain for 20 days. And post that, there was a dry period wherein there was no rain. And in that period, we saw see in the next video that you can see that this is the foam nest and it has gone a bit dry. So if the foam nest is not hydrated enough, the eggs cannot ooze down into the pond that on the side where the nest have been created. So they can't, the tadpoles cannot ooze down and get to the pond, and the pond would also get dry, and then they would not come up. All these babies, all these frog babies would die. So that is one effect of climate change that we are actually seeing on the ground right now. Another implication for this is that we don't know that in the next monsoon season, when it rains, whether they would um, breed or not, because one during this last season, 20 days, they were all calling, they're exhausted. So this the next monsoon time, they might not have that energy to come up and um, breed anymore. Also, even if they breed, because of this dry period, what happens is that they breed and we get adults also coming up, but they might not have places to go to. So pseudo malabaricus has different habitats that it uses in through its different stages. Like when it's an egg mass, it's on the side of a pond, and then the tadpole oozes down and it gets into the water. The tadpole lives in the water, and once the both the limbs come up, the hands and the legs come up, they would go out of the pond and then they go up the trees. These are tree frogs. So they would go up the trees. But to get there, they need to have shrubs which have water. It needs to be hydrated. So they need hydrated places until the tree to get there. So that won't be there if this dry period is extending. And yes, all of them will die. So that's one implication of climate change. And another thing is that because of the heat and these extreme fluctuations in heat and cold, in Munnar now in the last winter also, um, the temperature went down to minus, and that is not good for frogs as well. They will freeze. We have a general kind of knowledge that they would go into hibernation during the winter season, but most of the frogs in Munnar, what I've seen, they are happily active during the winter season, but when it goes to the freezing levels, because they are out and they are not hibernating, it's not good for them. And the heat time also, the UV levels are high. It is affecting him. They more and more they are not getting spaces to be in. The spaces to the spaces which has moisture where they can, these safe abodes are not there for them. So that is another big effect of climate change, which will cause them to decline. And I would like to ask again if he has he come, Monica?
No, Sethu, he hasn't joined. Because of some reason, I think he's unable to join
So
us.
that's
So
okay.
we'll see. We'll wait for another 5 minutes maybe, and then we can see. We can take up questions.
Okay, I think I will take the questions now then, and then I'll move on to my last slide after that. I'll take one or two questions now, and then I'll move on to the last slide.
Okay.
I'll,
So
now when we are waiting for him, yes.
yeah, so Abhishek has a question regarding the possibilities of someone joining as a volunteer with WTI for their region. So Abhishek, we'd like to know what region are you from and where. I've unmute you, Abhishek. So we'd like to know if from what region are you from and.
Hi, am I
Hi.
audible?
Yeah, Abhishek, I can hear you.
So basically, I've stayed at multiple places all over India, and currently I'm working with government sector, and I'm based out from Gandhinagar. So I'm
Okay.
in Gandhinagar, Gujarat.
Okay, wonderful. So, yeah, Abhishek, we have volunteering options. For example, during the ERN, we have an emergency relief network where that is not basically amphibian related, but those are rescues that we take up during the times of emergencies and natural calamities. And for those, we need certain details from you regarding what is your experience with wildlife handling and all of those. And if for volunteering thing, you can always write to us at info@wti.org.in. We can get you in touch with the HR department, who can then look at the possibilities of the availability for a volunteer position, and then we can always get back to you. So it will be lovely to have you as a volunteer. It's just a few protocols that you need to follow, and write to us at info@wti.org.in.
Any other questions?
None in the chat, but guys, if there are any questions, okay, we have a question from Kanan. He asks, are you optimistic about the future of frogs in India? While awareness of climate change is increasing, countries and corporates are not decarbonizing at required rate. Social media is full of traded species. So what can we do to conserve?
That is going to be my last slide.
Okay.
It looks like I think I should just jump into it.
Yeah, before that, if Kanan, you could wait for a couple of more questions we can get. If anybody has any questions, you can write to us, or in the chat window, or you can just raise your hands and I can unmute you also. So if there are any other questions, please let us know. Okay, so Prateek has a question. Is WTI working in Chandigarh, Bastar, or any project, and can I join it? Chhattisgarh, sorry. Yes, Prateek, we have a project in Chhattisgarh, and that is the Wild Buffalo project. And you can always, look up on the project on the website, and you can always send us your CV through the jobs section. So that will be it. And Sethu, just now Gururaja sir has joined, so I'm admitting him.
Sure, please.
So we'll take up the questions after he can share his views on the topic.
Is he?
Yeah.
Okay, I think I'll leave my space to Guru. Thank you, Guru, for joining. Monica, could you unmute him?
Yeah.
Hey, hi.
Hi.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, how are you, Guru?
I'm good. So sorry, I got involved in the DAC meeting and also it got delayed. Sorry for that.
No problem,
yeah.
no problem. We are waiting for you.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Good afternoon, everybody. So how shall we take it forward? Like what is the kind of issues that we are tackling in amphibians and climate change is what we are going to have a conversation about.
Yeah, so Guru, I had just given them an idea on what we are doing and the project and everything. So now, please, it's on to you.
Okay, so people, I'm sorry, I have not sharing any slide, but I thought we will discuss because many times we are often carried away by the nice looking good amphibian frog photographs, and then that's the end of the journey. So today I felt, let me show my face, and perhaps some of the ideas that we discuss can embed in our minds to take it forward, kind of thing. So I will begin with some of the insights that I'm getting from last 4 or 5 years. And thanks to citizen science initiatives that I'm doing, one is with the Metastring Foundation, and which is funded by the Habitat Trust grant, which is called Mapping Malabar Tree Toad Program. So the whole purpose of mapping at one end is to engage with people, because at the end of the day, what we are realizing is that any conservation issues, whether it's a hardcore science or even it's just to understand the habitat of a species, scientists alone cannot do many of these things, because we have our own limitations for resource access and accessibility. We also have issues in doing research in the confined space, kind of. So we are always happy in the four walls of a room, kind of stuff. So in this particular mapping tree toad project, what happened was we opened up this for people, and also not just verbally, it is also saying that you are the collaborators. So we ensured that when you go and record some of the species, it's on a Creative Commons licensing. The data is available for you to look into, and if you are going to publish it, please publish it, provided you acknowledge the effort of all the people who are involved in it, right? So at multiple levels it helped. So one is that it opened up our conversation also. It's not just limited to one scientist appreciating the other scientist in terms of publication and impact factors and patting ourselves, saying that I published in Nature or published somewhere else, kind of. Instead of that, we started going to the grassroots level and trying to say, the frogs are in your neighbor. So what you are trying to do, what is that we are together putting our hands together, what can we do? So people have mapped a lot, people have come up. So there is, like, when we started in 2014, we had about 4 observations coming from myself and a couple of administrators in this Mapping Malabar Tree Toad program. But now you can see that it's over 219 observations. Though there are observations which are repetitive, we allowed it to happen because someone who will be looking at a species for a number of occasions, let him post those observations is what our thought process was. And anybody who is doing a statistical analysis will always try to remove those redundant, repetitive observations for the analysis. So it is not about curtailing the person who is uploading. It is for the scientist who is going to analyze, or even for someone commoner who wants to analyze the data, he needs to understand what the kind of data is. So at the end of the day, we opened more for the people to join in and report. So it has helped us now. If you look at Malabar tree toad, its status is endangered as of now in IUCN status, but with the inputs from people, now its status has been delisted, and it's going to be a least concerned species, and they publish it, I think, perhaps in June, kind of. So this is one of the great example that we have in terms of citizen science partnership and getting into looking at amphibians and all. At the same time, it also provided me, from the perspective of climate change, certain issues we may have skipped. One key area is that the breeding season of amphibians. So we have been told that amphibians are monsoon breeders. So we have taken it for granted, kind of thing. So we look at every place. Our field works are always mapped between June and September, kind of thing. But when I started looking at the data that has come from mapping Malabar tree toad, it is quite apparent that they are not just breeders of monsoon. They perhaps breed pretty early, right? So there are two things here. One is that it is our understanding that it may be breeding early. The other point is that so far we have observed till last year, all observations were coming till the month, like only after the month of June, as the breeding individuals have been reported. But in last 2 years, one from Kerala, a couple of them from Kerala, and a couple of them from Karnataka, saying that the frog is breeding as early as April. So that April breeding record is an indication, if you simply look at the time shift, it's about 2 months prior to what was earlier known. It can be said that either, if you are seeing seriously from the climate perspective, whether there is a shift that has happened in breeding season. That's one way to look at. The other way to look at is whether we really knew about the frogs, this particular toad's breeding season at all. Are we all these days, are we looking at only at the fag end of the breeding season and then trying to say that, oh, okay, it breeds for the first 2 weeks of June and that's gone. But if we should have started much earlier, like March or April, kind of thing. So this is one of the key things that has emerged out from climate perspective, the foundation of data, as well as the kind of things that we are trying to do. What has happened with people is that, like with this data, is that we started understanding actually the breeding pattern. And perhaps if we continue to observe this for next 5 to 6 years, we may have an idea whether there's an actual shift in the breeding season of these Malabar tree toad. So that's one key example I wanted to cite about climate change and amphibians. The other one was the last year's Taukte, when it hit the coast of Karnataka. So Taukte came at around mid-May. And suddenly a couple of my friends from Dandeli region, they called me and said that the bullfrog has already turned into into yellow, and they have started breeding. And I said, just go and start observing it, and if it is possible, you can also post it on India Biodiversity portal. They did it, and after a couple of days of rain, and then there was a 15 days of non-rainy days over there. So again, this is not a conclusive example to say that, oh, amphibians have been changing their breeding pattern due to climate change and all. These are the pointers to look at now. So that 15 days of dry spell would have costed all the eggs their life, because the bullfrog eggs won't leave if it is desiccated place, right? So they need moisture, they need water, they need a stagnant pool of water. So and the other question came up was whether the frogs were able to breed again when proper monsoon set in post June. So this has led us to again monitor for long term. Now we are looking into the breeding behaviors of bullfrog and common toad And these are very common species. We are also not even talking about some species which is rare, endangered, threatened, which are titled species kind of. We are just talking about species which are very common. So I think I will stop here with these understanding as of today, we know like what is happening with respect to climate change and the frogs research and all. This will perhaps open up more in coming days because we need to. Yeah. So yeah. So that will definitely help us build a lot of basic data. Like many of the instances in India, what we know is a species being described, and that's it. Whereas if we monitor a species for long duration, I think we have a better understanding of impact of climate, whether there is a shift in the elevational gradient. Like some species, they say they are moving a particular elevational gradient and going further up. One of the key species in Karnataka is called Rochester's indigo, or the indigo bush frog, which appears on 1,860-meter elevation, and it's known only from one locality of Kudremukh Peak. And after that, we don't know anything. Now, if it is moving up, where it can go after 1,800, there's no peak, right? If the climate change is going to happen. So, but this is very speculative as of now. We need fundamental data to really establish the impact of climate change. But there are smaller evidences in terms of Stokes effect, or in looking at the Malabar tree toad. We have evidences which are pointing towards the impact of climate change. So I will stop here. And if there are any questions, we can actually look into this discussion further.
Thank you, Guru sir. So we actually have a question from there is a question from Sandhya, which you'd asked before you joined actually, but you can help answer that. So she has a question saying, we have a well in Kerala with frogs living in it. Would be nice if you could explain how their life cycle revolves around humans.
Yeah. So that's a wonderful question. So perhaps if you for quite a few moments in our life, if you block ourselves from being very science heavy kind of thing and just understand our cultural embeddedness with frogs. Frogs have been part of our culture, and it's been always worshipped for harbinger of rain or monsoon kind of stuff. And when the frog croaks, there's a rain. All these things are there. I'm not debating about whether we need to believe in that, whether there is any science involved in it, and all those things. I'm not going to debate on that. But what we need to appreciate is that people were engaging with some of these animals which are around us, right? So frog in a well, perhaps it's a great indication that the climate or the quality of the water is really good. That's why it is surviving over there. If you come to Bangalore and look into many of our lakes, you don't even find any frog. So it's a clear indication in one way, saying that okay, frogs are doing good in there. But what I really don't know as of now is that how these wells are supporting the populations, whether these are bullfrogs which are surviving over there, when they move out of from one well to the other, what happens to their population. These are final level studies we need to do in order to understand their movement pattern, when they do move, if they move, right? What happens if people deplete these water resources, where is their habitat, and what happens if all these wells are dried up. So these are questions that we can look into, but majority, like the final line for this conversation is that we have the amphibians were there even before us, right? They were 360 million years ago. They have seen dinosaurs coming and going. They are with us now, and we are with them now. We need to figure out what is the way forward for our coexistence, right? So they know what they have to do, but we should not be polluting our water bodies.
Thank you, Guru sir. Sandhya, we hope that answers your question. There is one more question on from Vivek. He's asked if WTI is working in Madhya Pradesh on any projects. So Vivek, we do not have any amphibian specific projects in Madhya Pradesh, but yeah, we have WTI is working on a lot of other wild aid projects in Madhya Pradesh, and there are other short-term projects in Madhya Pradesh, and we're working with the forest department there. So I hope that answers the question. Then there is another question. Is there any citizen science program conducted by WTI? So yeah, the WhatsApp group that you've shared on the chat is one of the examples. And Sethu, if you could take that question, and also the previous question that you'd said you'd like to present on that, you could maybe continue with that. Just a second, Sethu, I'm just unmuting you. Sorry for the glitch, guys. Just a second. Yeah.
Thank you, Monica. I would actually like to ask, is there any more questions to Gururaja, because he's pretty busy now. I can take these questions after that. So if you have any more questions to Guru, please ask them. I'll take these questions after your questions to him.
Yeah. So Nandini has a question. How is the current heat wave in India affecting the amphibians this year and their breeding patterns, if the breeding season has been observed to start in April, May?
You need to unmute Gururaja.
Yeah. I'm just doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. That's what. So when I did my fieldwork this summer in some of the areas in Western Ghats, like Sakleshpur or Kudremukh area, what I figured out is that they are already hyperactive. They have started giving out their breeding calls. So this is perhaps an indication that there is a shift in the breeding season. So whether it is due to the change in the heat or it's already being there and we don't know anything of these things, then we need more observation, is what I'm trying to convey over here. So we have observed certain things that is happening, but with that one observation, we cannot directly correlate with what is happening with the heat wave that has happened across India. So we need multiple observations from multiple localities for multiple years. Then we will be able to showcase in a better way, or with a statistical significance, what we talk about, to say that, okay, this is the shift that has happened because of change in the climate, heat wave, perhaps some rain, erratic rainfall. All these things are possible when we have data. So as of now, we are in that first level of data of saying, okay, what is being observed? Can we just even document that, right? Yeah. Hope this is answering that question. And if my answer appears like very vague, it is also the fact that our research on these domains are in the Indian level is in that state. We are taking steps, one step at a time, kind of, because we were heavily focused on taxonomy and systematics. In the last 20 years, we only described like 200 plus species. So now we are saying, okay, now can we bring in ecology into this? Can we bring in something about population dynamics into it, climate issues into it, bioacoustics, and see what's the change that's happening, kind of. So that's why my answers will be appearing very, very vague at this point in time. Perhaps in 10 years down the line, we have responses for many of your questions.
I agree, Guru. Even when these kind of questions get thrown at me, I'm like, we don't know for sure. We don't know.
Yeah. So true. So true. So true.
Okay. So there is one more question. If you could share your views on climate change affecting amphibian health, for instance,
Mycosis.
Yeah, affects amphibian skin, and this disease has been linked with climate change.
Yeah, Sethu.
Oh, I should take that. Okay.
Yes.
Yes, it has been linked with climate change, but again, I would like to say that it was I think Kitrid was they discovered this disease on frogs when I was born in '89. And till now we don't have we don't really have much data or insight onto how it is related to climate change, or whether climate change is the actual reason why the disease have come up, or what else is it. We don't
Yeah.
yes.
So true, so true. So there is mountain chicken project and all these things happening where they really linked up the chytrid issues to that of climate change, the temperature variation have bringing the chytrid infections in the frogs and all. But when it comes to, again, coming to Indian scenario, uh, thanks to Karthikeyan Vasudevan team, which has traveled across Western Ghats to map number of families. In fact, almost all the families of frogs in the Western Ghats have chytrid infections, and the chytrid infection is very endemic. So what is being a solution elsewhere may not be able to replicate similar kind of solution in the Western Ghats. So these are a couple of insights that has come from his work. Again, that's a monumental work in terms of saying that, okay, India has, and the Indian frogs have, are suffering from chytrid fungus. But again, so when it comes to linking up with the climate change and chytrid, we need more data and more field surveys across the Ghats. And Ghats is one example. I would say the entire Indian subcontinent, we need a systematic survey plan, because we can't simply be focusing only on Western Ghats and saying that rest of India, go whatever happens. It cannot happen in that manner. We need a systematic observations for across India, kind of. At that scale, we need to work.
And I think recently there have been some papers that said that it is the Asian strain has been causing problems for populations in Indonesia and the Southeast Asian side. So it's not too far that that might happen in India too.
Yeah, yeah.
Any other questions?
Yes, Sethu, there is one more from Kanan. Is the Munnar region in the red list of ecosystems? If so, then perhaps everything in the ecosystem can be assumed to be in decline, even if we have good year or not. One good year or not, is his question.
I no, it is not in the red list. It has not been listed yet. And that entails a whole lot of procedures and a whole lot of surveys. So yeah, which again, as I told you, so Munnar is listed as a key biodiversity area depending on the number of species that is found there. So that is what the level of knowledge that we have about the region, and also its natural history as well. Munnar, unlike other places, the natural history is a little hazy. So, and I am not entirely sure whether we can just assume that everything is in decline. Well, that's
Correct.
one scare that we would all like to keep in mind, so that we can work towards it, towards overcoming a problem if there comes one. So be prepared. So that is one thing. But can we assume that it is in decline? No, I don't think so. In the sense that it is dependent anyways. It is dependent on a very minute level to species, and also how also the area where it is, whether it's what kind of habitat are we talking about. It is dependent on that.
So true, so true. Thanks for that, Sethu. The other issue is that many of the times, all these categories, like IUCN categories, are all based on certain set of criteria, and it's also species specific. So some of these criteria, what is applicable for amphibian, need not apply for a bird species. And just saying that Munnar is in such a eco-sensitive zone is a much better word Not that all the species belonging to a eco-sensitive zone needs to be an endangered species. And moving forward is to delist many of these things. Being in an endangered list is like being in a category kind of thing, which is not a very good sign. So let us not also try to put everything. It's also not a good way for conservation efforts, because you need to understand in certain points in time what is happening to a population, what is the change happening. So for that, you need to do research. So without research, some of these things cannot work out well for conservation. So in a nutshell, if I say, like, let us not put anything bracketed or putting in a fortified area kind of thing and say all belonging to Munnar should be considered as endangered. That will be a very sweeping sentence or statement if we can think in that manner, and it will be disastrous.
Pluggers and then other people who live there, it's bad for them as well. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Any other?
Yeah, there are a couple of more questions. And I think these will be the last questions that we take for today's session. If there are any more questions, you may write to us at info@wti.org.in. I'll share the details in the chat window. And so the one question that is by Monish is that, is roadkill one of the main reasons for decline in amphibian population, and why such cases are increasing these days?
Wow. Sethu, go ahead.
I'll go ahead. Okay. Main reason. So again, we haven't quantified that. So I cannot for sure say that it's the main reason for amphibian decline. But yes, a lot of frogs are getting killed because they use the roads for migration. So they move from one habitat to the other. Like I told you earlier, the tadpoles, when they become adults, they need to move on to their specific places like the shrubs or the trees, and they do it through the roads. And this would be like numbers of 20s to hundreds, depending on the species that it is happening. And then one car going straight will kill all of it. And yes, that is a problem. It is a problem. And it is increasing because there is a lot of night driving.
Yeah. So to add to Sethu Parvathy's thing, I did a small work with Sheshadri and Amit Yadav way back in 2007-8 in different land uses in the Western Ghats near Sharavati Valley. So initially we thought that the road kills are depending on the land uses kind of thing, but our study showed that irrespective of the land uses you have, so irrespective of the land uses that you have, the diversity of roadkill remains the same, right? And the number of kills are almost equal. So that was published in JOTT long back, 2008, I believe. What I'm trying to say here is that, again, these are one-time studies, two-time studies kind of thing. And the other thing is, we also need to now understand what the National Highway Authority is trying to do, where it is actually making larger roads, what was existing over there. So if you start digging deeper into all these aspects, where we end up is saying that we don't have enough data. We don't know what is happening. So it looks very shaky for many people here. Like it appears as though that what we are talking about, we don't even know anything. So how can we conclude? So these are very good issues to look into. And I'm not saying that they may be contributing significantly in the amphibian decline, but if it is in a space where there are very locally endemic species, and then there are road cuttings happening and the road kills are happening, and definitely that will be devastating. Because frogs migrate for many reasons. One is the metamorphosis, what Sethu Parvathy was mentioning. There are other reasons too. They will be looking for their mates, and perhaps female is crossing the road when the male is working from elsewhere. So female death of a male, but whereas when the female population wiped out, right? So we need to understand what is the sex ratio of the species being killed, and these are the pointers where it actually opens up many of these research topic also to be taken up as a simple projects in the colleges or high schools kind of thing, very simple projects, but they have a value in understanding of what is the impact of roadkill in the amphibian population, right now this is where we are.
Yes, right now.
Yeah.
That's so true.
Okay, so the last question for the day is from Shemanti. Considering the impact that early rains or other climate variations are having on frog breeding patterns, what are the prospects of implementing captive breeding programs to save endangered populations of amphibians? And if there are any organizations in India working on this?
Say to you go first.
No. We don't have any organizations working on, but WTI, with the start of this project, we are scoping to see one. Before starting a conservation breeding program, there is a lot of things that you have to think about. One is whether it is entirely necessary, and do we have the resources for it? And also another thing, do we know enough about the species to do that?
Yeah.
So without getting all of these information in hand, jumping into starting a conservation breeding program, especially for an endangered amphibian, uh, in my opinion, is not great. And yes, there are no organizations right now. There are no running conservation breeding programs for amphibians yet.
Yeah.
Maybe in the future, if we do get enough understanding of the ecology and the breeding and what, there is a lot of these things, like I told you, like what amount of hydro period do they need to do this? I mean, all of those nuances we need to figure out for each species to do this.
Yeah. To add a bit more, Lacones from CCMP Hyderabad, they are working on some species, but I don't know what are the species over there. Because Karthik is part of captive breeding programs, and he conducted a couple of workshops with Ben and all. Again, so in Indian conditions, what we lack is the understanding of a species from its ecological perspective. As rightly pointed out by Sethu, we don't know the population. We are attached to a species because of its appearance, because of the title that we give. For example, the pig-nosed frog. It got into limelight. It's an amazing species. It has a biogeographic history. There is no doubt about its qualification kind of thing. But can we simply get into a captive breeding program for the species? And that becomes a problem here because we don't know the ecology of the species, whether it's only one species we have, where else the species is distributed, what is the population size. And then if we do captive breeding, how we are going to reintroduce it back into the system. Because we don't know its breeding mechanism itself. You only know as of now is it comes for 15 days in a year and croaks and breeds and goes off. But is it true? Or do we have anything more than that information? So unless we have all these kind of information, I think captive breeding, getting into the captive breeding, just saying that, oh, there's an endangered species, can we breed in the lab and then put it back? Will it work? No, it will not work unless we know the ecology of a species. In order to know the ecology, then we need to have the information. So what we are saying is our information about ecology of any species is very, very, very limited in Indian conditions. And for the 460 plus species we have in India, whether it's an Anura or a Sicilian or a salamander, perhaps we know 25 species of their ecology. Remaining 450 or 440 something numbers, we don't know anything apart from their description. So now you see where is the gap, how it can be pitched in, right? So we know the technology, we know what can be done, but do we know the ecology to do it in reality? So that is where we are. So if more people join in and then take it forward in their nearby area, you need not have to come to Western Ghats to study this. If you can do it in your own
True.
neighborhoods and figure out whether you have a bullfrog or a common toad, what is their population, how many are living over there, then we start getting this smaller information which will build over a period of time. And then getting into the captive breeding program will work in a much better manner.
Yes. So just adding to that, the Kartikeyan Vasudevans, so they did come up with a manual
Yeah.
for, I think, tree frogs and Indiranas.
Yeah.
Yes, and I'm not entirely sure of all the species, but then Indiranas and tree frogs, I'm pretty sure they have come up with.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
Okay, so I guess that brings us to the end of the session today. So thank you so much, Guru Sir and Sethu, for the engaging session and for all the hard work you guys put in to conserve frog species.
Monica, could you give me 1 more minute for my
Oh,
last
sure,
slide?
sure. Yeah, yeah. Please go ahead. Sorry.
Just 1 more minute.
Yeah, definitely. Please.
Because I don't want to miss out on that. We talked a lot about all of these
Yes, we had
things
a question. Yeah.
and yes. So yes, one is join the Frog Squad. It's a WhatsApp group. For now, we had started it where you can just post pictures, just tell us where you got the picture from, what are you seeing, and this can actually improve the data that we were talking about on what is happening where to what species. So that will help us a lot on understanding a lot of things, because you will be our eyes and ears everywhere, and it would really be, as Gururaja sir was saying, it will be really easy for us to, I mean, any analyst can do any analysis. All this data, if it comes together, at least gets recorded somewhere, then we can improve our knowledge. So that is one thing. And then for another is to make a pond in your backyard. It's not a big I'm not asking you to make a pond of like 1 feet depth and anything. It's just a small thing wherein you can hold some water during the rain time. You can just put on a tarpaulin sheet, and also just make sure that it has a lot of dry leaves around it, so that it would trap the water that is falling. So during rainy season, they will fall, and frogs will have more spaces to be in. And another thing is to make a board, which is a picture of one I've given here. This is one I've made in my friend's garden for actually a toad. It's not seen there; it had gone somewhere else when I took the photograph. So it's basically 3 stones. It's just 3 stones. I just put them up like a small house kind of thing, and there are dry leaves around it, in it, and it's also in a place where it is hydrated. There is water, so it can also be there. So these things you can do at your home itself. You do have land. And also another thing, if you do have a little bit of backyard, please don't sweep out and clear out all the leaves. Let the leaves be. These are safe spaces for amphibians and for a lot of frogs also. So another thing is help amphibians in need. If you do see all these frogs migrating and you're driving, just stop your car. If you go a little near them, they will all hop out of the road, and then make sure that they're all out, and then you can move forward. It's just 2 minutes that you have to spare for that. So this is what I wanted to say, and the link towards joining Frog Squad will be shared with all of you. Uh, really appreciate you all attending the webinar, and Guru, thanks so much for the amazing talk that you just gave. It was really amazing.
Thank you, Sethu Parvathy. I didn't do much. I just spoke what I did in the field. That's all, and that too with the help of people. It's not just me. So thanks again to you all for being patient listeners and posing those questions. All the very best. Have a great time. Have a great frog monsoon.
Guru sir, just a second. Sethu, if you could stop sharing
Yeah.
your screen, I had a poll.
Sure.
So I can put that up. So we have a poll.
Okay.
So I am launching the poll. It will show up on your screens. So if you could just, before we conclude the session, if you could just answer the questions, and it'll be great.
I think, Guru, if you're busy, please.
Yeah, Guru sir.
I think it's almost done. It's done. It's
Thank
just a poll and done. Thanks
Yeah,
so much for being here.
sure. My pleasure. It's always my pleasure. Thank you very much, guys. Yeah, bye.
So we have a few more responses to left. We're almost done. 50% of the people have responded. So more than that, 62 now. So we're just waiting for everybody to respond, and we can just end the session. So it was just wonderful to have you all here, and just to add on, all our social media platforms, we are there on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, everywhere. Our website is there. You can visit our website, subscribe to our newsletter. We'd definitely like to stay in touch with all of the participants who joined us for this session today. So thank you so much. I am ending the poll now and also the session. Thank you, Sethu.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, great.